We'll see.
Everyone's coming in. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Hello, parents. Hi, everybody in Adams 12. Come on in. Good to see you.
Please select a language. You should see a little globe at the bottom of your screen, and please select English or Spanish. Welcome. Please select English or Spanish. There should be a little globe at the bottom of your screen, and we will get started shortly. All right. Well, we are really excited to have you all tonight. Rosalind Wiseman is here with us. From where we learn to where we work, Rosalind Wiseman fosters civil dialogue and inspires communities to build strength, courage, and purpose. She is the founder of Cultures of Dignity, an organization that shifts the way communities think about physical and emotional well-being by working in close partnership with the experts of those communities, young people, educators, policymakers, and business and political leaders. In May 2022, Rosalind and co-author Shantara McBride will publish Courageous Discomfort, How to have brave, life-changing conversations about race and racism by Chronicle Books. She is the author of multiple New York Times bestsellers, including Queen Bees and Wannabes, Helping Your Daughter Survive Cliques, Gossip, Boyfriends, and the New Realities of the World, the groundbreaking best-selling book that was the basis for the Broadway musical and movie Mean Girls. Masterminds and Wingmen, Helping Our Boys Cope with Schoolyard Power, Locker Room Tests, Girlfriends, and the New Rules of a Boy World, which was awarded Best Parenting Book by Books for a Better Life. She is also the co-author of the Distance Learning Playbook for Parents, How to Support Your Child's Academic, Emotional, and Social Learning in Any Setting, published in 2020. And the Owning Up Curriculum, a comprehensive social and emotional learning program for grades 4 through 12, which is in widespread use across the country and world. National media regularly depends on Wiseman's expertise on ethical leadership, conflict, media literacy, youth culture, parenting, and bullying prevention. She has been profiled in the New York Times, People, Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, The Washington Post, and USA Today. Wiseman is a frequent guest on national media like the Today Show, CNN, NPR, and affiliates throughout the country. Wiseman has served on many federal and local advisory boards and speaks throughout the US and abroad. She lives right here in Colorado with her husband and 2 sons. We have been working with Rosalind in Cultures of Dignity for the past 4 years. We have thoroughly enjoyed partnering in learning and supporting the growth and development of skills in our schools. Tonight, Rosalind will explore proven ways to cultivate stronger relationships, build and preserve better boundaries, and navigate conflict. Thank you for listening and learning with us tonight. Let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I just want to say at some point I have to, we were talking about it before we got on into the real, things went live, is that I have to do something with you people in person at some point. So I hope I get to do that really soon. But I really do feel that I'm in community with you all, and I'm right down the road from you all. And it's, I have to tell you, as someone who every day wakes up and works with school districts around the world, today was El Salvador and Washington, DC. I value Adams 12 so highly. And the administrators, the counselors, the social emotional learning specialists that I work with, and the people cultures of dignity work with, we are so grateful for being in partnership with the county. And I know as a parent myself that it's messy, things are messy. Maybe you're had a difficult experience at Adams 12, things can't be perfect, but I have to tell you, I just know day in and day out that the people that are working in this county that we work with, these K-8 schools that we work with, I just am in such awe of their ability to just stay committed to the children and wanting to do their best. And it's been a really hard time the last couple of years for all different kinds of reasons. And I just want to really say how much I appreciate the work and the partnership with the county. So hopefully I get to say that to you in person one day. Okay, so I'm telling you sort of like how I'm feeling. I'm just grateful that it's not so unbelievably cold as it was last night. Last night was uncivilized. That was uncivilized behavior. But I want to do this. I want to check in with you all. So what I want you to do is you're going to be able to put in the chat. That's right. I'm going to see this. I'm sort of disappeared. You can sort of see my hands. I want you to put into the chat 2 words that describe how you're feeling right now. And this is a way for us to just come in and be centered and be together and just hone in on why are you here today? So put 2 words into the chat. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, this is going to be, I'm going to ask you several times for things because we're going to make this interactive. That if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can do it to me privately, or you can just, just think about it and just put the words in your mind and your heart. All right. So, and I'm going to try and talk more slowly. I need to do that anyway for the people that are translating in the 2 ways. So you people, thank you so much for translating this evening. All right. I just tired of the cold. Last night I walked for about 20 minutes and I don't know. It was just too much. It's just too much. Okay, let's give it another 30 seconds. I don't know, Serene, I haven't felt that. I need to do whatever you're doing. I got to do that. I need serenity in my life. Okay. All right, so we're putting out like, here's how we're feeling. If you're doing this with your kids should maybe, share with you or put that in the chat too. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we all need, I'm sorry. I have, sort of humor about parenting and because there's really that's just the way we have to get through. This is my strategy for getting through hard times, is to laugh sometimes. So if you are having an experience of someone in your family having a meltdown right now, or you are, and you're somehow focused on this presentation, I'm so grateful. So, and hopefully this evening we'll be able to give you some tools that you will be able to use like in real life. Okay, so let's go to, I'm going to give you a little tiny bit. If you happen to come to my session last time, I just wanted to give a little refresher on something I think is really important. And that is the definition of happiness, right? So happiness is, for parents, in my experience, is that there's sort of 2 ways that we look at parenting and as far as wanting our children to be happy. Because if you ask parents, like, lot of times, like, what do you want for your children? They'll say, oh, I just want my child to be happy. And so there's one sort of group of like thinking about that. That's like, I just, even though you shouldn't say it or feel it, but you do, or your actions do, which is, I don't want my child to experience disappointment or failure or difficulties and things like that. And so I'm going to stop them from having those experiences because I just want them to be happy. So that's one kind of bucket. Parents are great at rationalizing that they don't feel that way. By the way, I've done it myself. And then on the other side, there's there's a experience of parents where, especially if they have children who've gone through really hard times with social dynamics, with especially with peers, like really hard times, or they've gone through their own like their child's gone through really difficult experiences for themselves, that it feels like I just want them to be happy. And so the point I'm making is that there are very understandable reasons why we just feel like I want my child to be happy, but I want to reframe how we define happiness. So I'm going to reframe it this way. We want to look for having meaning beyond oneself, a hope of success, meaningful social connection, satisfying work, and a place to process and find peace. So that is, as parents, is we are trying to think about happiness I'm asking you to reframe that of, as I go through my parenting journey with my child, and make no mistake, it is a journey, of course, is that if I can get and focus on this, then it gets easier to to see in the larger picture of what my goals are and how I should conduct myself with my child. I also want to really define that what I just put up here is very countercultural, because we live in a culture that actually doesn't want any of this for us. It actually, if we think about this, wants us to be unhappy. Because of the culture that we live in, the overall culture, and the way I define culture is everything you know, but have never been sat down and taught, you just know, is that the culture is saying things like, don't have meaning beyond oneself, just focus on yourself. Hope of success, no, we need a guarantee. Meaningful social connection is, doing likes on Instagram or something like that. Satisfying work, many of us feel like, wait, why am I doing this again? And so it's there's a place to process and find peace. Well, this phone, which I have next to me, is because I'm going to do some timing with you all. This is the thing that stops us in many ways from having a place to process and find peace. So I just want us to reframe happiness as in a larger context, and to recognize that when we do this, we are being countercultural, and it gets actually easier for us to focus on really what's the most important things and goals for our children. So that's the first concept that I want to go over with you. The second is that I usually start, because I think it's helpful to go from bigger concepts to granular, smaller things of what do we do in situations and what do we say. But they have to be, what we do and say has to be grounded in principles. So for those of us in Colorado, and I moved here from Washington, D.C., actually about 10 years ago, is that I didn't know the experience of driving on a mountain road with snow coming at you, and you get sort of mesmerized by the snow, and then it gets really scary. So I want you to think about principles in the way that, so when you're driving in on those roads, and it's sort of twisty and turny, and you don't really know what's around the corner, that those guardrails, right, or those lines in the road, they provide guidance for us. They provide guidance for like how we're going to get down this road. And sometimes it can be really scary getting down that road or going up the road. And so we need things to keep us on the road, and principles do that for our thoughts and for our actions. So I'm going to get a little bit more specific. So principles are, we are going to commit to treating ourselves and others with dignity, with inherent worth. We are going to think about that no one knows everything, together we know a lot. This thing that we're doing right now is an expression of that principle. I have a lot of experience working with young people, does not make me an expert on your child. I'm working with Adams 12 a lot. It does not make me an expert on any of these schools that I work in, but together we have a tremendous amount of expertise. Listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear. So that doesn't mean you have to agree. It just means that you walk into a situation being prepared to be changed by what you hear. So I want you to think about the amount of times that you might have walked into a situation with a teacher, with a coach, with your own child, with the person you're parenting with, and you already have in your head what they're going to say. So anything that they say is going to be filtered through that narrative. So if we can think about listening as being prepared to be changed by what we hear, we not only walk into a situation more literally open-minded, but the person on the other side of it feels that in us. They feel that in us. So that in and of itself, from the first moment of a conversation, that is apparent of whether or not you are going to be listening or not, or vice versa. Be easy on people, hard on ideas. So let me, from my heart to your heart, say that we have got to switch how hard we are on people, because we are so hard on people. And because we are so hard on people, it gets much harder for us to be hard on ideas the way we should be. We have significant issues that are challenging us in our communities as parents, as educators working together. We must, for the sake of our children, be able to be easy on people and hard on ideas, not hard on people, easy on ideas. We want to validate, not relate. And so that is for the thing for parents that we can say to our children. And we can, and this is something that comes from the best of intentions, but doesn't have actually the impact that I think we want, which is we often will say, I know what it's like to be your age. I was your age once. Or teachers can sometimes say to parents, like, I'm a parent too. I know what it's like. And by the way, I always tell teachers, do not say that, because you don't know what it's like to be parenting right now, that child in this school, in this situation, they don't know. And likewise, you don't know with your child what it's like to be them right now. And so it is really important to say, you know what, I actually don't know what it's like to be your age right now. And I need to listen first before I give you advice, for example. So you want to validate them and the difference of their experience as a way to be able to connect the relationship. We want to seek to align positive intent with positive impact. So I just said that one thing about sometimes teachers will do that in a way to be closer to parents, and sometimes that really backfires, understandably. But I also would ask you to think about, and again, I do this with teachers too, is to say, really think about what the tone of what we're saying and the content of what we're saying. So when we say to our children, why did you do that? Why questions like that are often accusations, or they come across as not being good enough or somehow a failure. And so we want to really actually stay away from when we say things with that tone. And lots of times, frankly, the questions that begin with why get very hard to have intent match impact. So we want to seek to align our intent with our impact. And when we don't, we want to be able to acknowledge it and say, and be able to say, I need to treat myself and others with dignity by recognizing that. And we want to really be able to be able to think in our hearts and our minds that asking for help is a strength and not a weakness. So this is a real big one for me, because young people, I mean, all of them are, but young people must for their emotional, physical, psychological health, must recognize that asking for help is a capacity and a skill. It is not a weakness. And I have to say, I am concerned about the way in which, this is talking about sort of communities at large, but if we're going to get to a place where adults don't trust each other or think the worst of each other, then what happens is it gets much, much harder to be able to ask for help. And it's hard enough as a parent, frankly, and I can speak to this in my own personal experience, that when your children are struggling for whatever reason, some of it can be hard, it can be embarrassing, it can sometimes shame can get sort of wrapped up in that. Like, are you as a parent a failure? Like, what's wrong? All these things sort of get all worked up inside. And parents cannot do this alone. They cannot parent alone. we have to be able to reach out to the people that love our children, and maybe sometimes are, and because they are actually not these people's parents, that they have the expertise and the wisdom and that love your kid and they know your child for better and for worse, that they can work with you in partnership. So if we are getting to a place with parents who feel like they can't reach out to other people for help, that they have to do it all their own, or parents always know best, then parenting is really lonely. And that is not the way that we need to be parenting, because we are all really in this together. And so being able to say, asking for help is a strength, it's a capacity, it is not a weakness, literally can be life-changing and life-saving for your child. So you can tell like how deeply, not only do I feel about these principles, but how much I feel deeply connected to you all and to your community, and how important this is for your children, some of whom I get to see sometimes, and they're just, you know, I have their little heads, their little cute heads in my mind. So I hope you can hear like where this is coming from. So here's my question to you all. What principle do you think you would like to take after this presentation is over? Which principle do you want to take with you to apply to your life, to your family, to how you're parenting? And by the way, because I've heard there's some kids on this, which I love, let your parents answer first before you tell them what they think that you should do, what they should do. Okay, like give them a break for a second, and then afterwards maybe you can, you know, if you think there's one that's really important, then you can tell them, but let them do it first. Okay, let them do it first. Okay, it is Prezi. For those of you who are asking me what platform I'm using, I am using Prezi, which allows me to do this kind of thing, so I can speak to you more easily. All right, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds, 45 seconds to put in your principles.
Rosalind, while they're doing that, can you give an example of matching intent and impact to illustrate that principle more?
Sure. So, and Sarah, to help me out if, you know, if there's something that I didn't get. So, okay, so when your child has, I mean, teachers can do this too, but when you say to your child, why did you do that? You might really want to know why they were doing whatever that was, but the impact of how that comes across to your child is that there was something wrong, that they did something wrong. And I mean, actually last night I was doing a webinar with a group of, two teenagers, and I asked them, like, because it was about high expectations, and what was the language that parents used and how kids heard it. And one of it was a junior boy said, when my parent comes home and says to me, so what did you do all day? That he said, yeah, they're actually just asking me, like, did I do everything that they think I am supposed to do? And then I feel like I somehow have not done the things I'm supposed to do, and then I don't want to talk to them anymore. So it really could be that the parent was like, what did you do all day, or something like that. But the way it comes across, the impact might not be the same. And then the other thing I think about is sometimes teachers, like if a child, you know, if a child, here's a really good one, teachers or parents, when a child comes to you and tells you a problem, like some child's been mean to them, and teachers and parents can say, don't let it bother you, turn the other cheek, you know, those kinds of things. And really, just don't let it bother you. By the time the vast majority of kids come and talk to an adult, they've been thinking about talking to an adult for a very long time. So they've already been turning the other cheek. They've already been trying to ignore it. Just ignore it. You're the better person. All those things are coming from a good place. But the impact of it is that the child will tend to not talk to the adult afterwards about that, because they feel dismissed, or they feel like their experience is dismissed, and they feel like there's really nowhere to go. And they're also, the message that's implied is that if you can't take it and can't ignore it, then there's something wrong with you. So for all those reasons, it doesn't come from a bad place, but the impact is really not good. So we want to seek to align positive intent with positive impact. which is why in that case, you might want to say something like, I'm really sorry. Thank you for telling me that I'm so sorry that happened to you. And together, let's figure out what we can do so you feel a little bit better. So that would be a really good example of having intent aligned with impact. Sarah, did I miss anything, or do you have something to add?
That's great. No, I think that's wonderful.
Okay. All right. I just want to check my chat, see if you all need anything. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's keep going. And I'm going to move my head so I'm not, like that. Okay. So in the description for this evening, there's a lot about emotions, and emotional regulation is really, frankly, one of the reasons that your child goes to school, because school's about group. Let me take off the Prezi for a second. So school's about, learning. It's about learning, like math and science and, lots of different things. But it's really about, the only way you can learn is by being emotionally regulated. And schools are also about group dynamics. They always have been. And can you understand the rules, the social rules that are going on in this group? So it's complicated. And so emotional regulation and managing how you feel during the day, and then being able to articulate that for yourself and others, is an essential skill for school. That is why, by the way, all of the things that Adams 12 are doing in all different kinds of capacities, and it's complicated, it's hard. I'm not gonna, fib to you all that this is easy stuff. It's not. Even under the best of circumstances, it's not easy. But the reason at core why social emotional learning is so important is because at base, it is teaching that emotions are real, and that we have to learn the role of emotions in our executive functioning, and then how that impacts how we are able to learn in a classroom. If you know as parents that if your child is upset about something and is really, they're not going to be able to focus on their schoolwork in a different way. So let me explain to you here, I'll give you an example, is that one of the things I tell teachers is you cannot say to children, just, coming back from recess or lunch, just leave it outside, because children can't leave it outside. And they come, and if they try to, or if they're not allowed this or given the skills, or the teacher doesn't understand that process, and they come into the classroom and they're dysregulated, meaning they distract other kids, they distract themselves, they're acting out, whatever it is, then what happens is that they haven't left it in, they can't, they're being asked to do something that they cannot do. They're being set up for failure, not success. That is why many social emotional learning is so important for teachers to understand, and also for students to understand what is happening in their bodies. So I'm going to show you, what is emotional regulation. It is getting clear about your emotions, and when that happens, you are empowered to define your experiences. And emotions are real, but they aren't permanent. This is so powerful, especially as we go through the amazing, incredible transitions that we've done. I think y'all went maskless, I think it was 10 days ago, last week, something like that. So emotion, that creates, there's been so much. So emotions are real, but they are not permanent. You can change the way you feel, which is so important as a parent to be able to feel that yourself, but also to be able to say to your child, the emotions you're feeling right now, they are real. No one gets to say to you, nobody gets to say to anybody else, what you're feeling isn't real. You're overreacting, you took it the wrong way, anything like that. Your emotions are real, but just because they're real doesn't mean they always have to be that way. And so we need to be able as a parent to say, we can move through this and we can change the way we feel, acknowledges your child and what they're going through, and gives them a path to move forward and through it. So the more we can describe our feelings, the more options we have to understand and communicate them. So when your child says, I'm so stressed, or adults will tend to say, teachers will tend to say to me, I had one yesterday, not from Adams 12, but I had a teacher yesterday just break down into tears because she is so overwhelmed. And the word overwhelmed is what most educators, I think, are feeling right now. And it's really important, if you're an educator listening to this, to be more granular about what that means for your own emotional health. I'm really suggesting to you to write down, what is it you are feeling? And that is true, parents, for your children. When your children say, I'm bored, or when they say, I hate that, or I'm so angry, I'm angry. If we can encourage them to say, well, can you give me a little bit more specifics, or can you write it down for yourself? They can write down the word angry on the top of a napkin or a piece of paper or on their phone, and then just say, like, write down all the words that come to mind for you. I'll give you 60 seconds. We can time it, of what are the words, if that works for them, try and think of all the different words that are under that feeling of being overwhelmed or stressed or angry or sad. Because the more we can figure that out, the better we'll be able to help your child. And again, to speak to the importance of emotional regulation and all of this kind of work and supporting it in schools, is that when your child comes home and says, Mom, Dad, I hate my class, I'm so bored, that they could be bored because they think the class is too easy. They could not like the class because it's too hard, or there could be something going on in the social dynamics of the class that they don't like. They really don't like, don't feel comfortable, don't feel safe, but they don't know how to tell you. And so they just say I'm bored as a catch-all phrase. But in order to respond appropriately and be able to solve the problem, we need to get more granular. Parents need to get more granular. Teachers need to get more granular. So when our children say things that are in general like that, we need to say something like, okay, I'm really sorry about that. Can you give me a few more specifics, a few more details so that I don't make assumptions? Because young people don't like it when adults make assumptions about them. So if you own that and say, like, I really don't want to make assumptions, so can you give me some more specifics? Then not only are they articulating it for you, but they're, even in some ways, more importantly, they're articulating it for themselves. And then once y'all can figure that out, then you can figure out a more clear path to move forward. All right, so that is the importance of emotional regulation. Oh, right, I forgot this part. So when that happens, by the way, emotional intelligence goes up and anxiety goes down. And being able to reduce young people's anxiety is so extraordinarily important. And by the way, of course, when our children are unhappy and anxious, how do we walk around in the world? I know as a mom that when I have one child who has suffered from that you walk around, it felt to me like there was like a 400-pound anvil on my chest all the time. So if you have that experience, like being able to granularly do this with children means that their anxiety will go down and they will feel more in control of themselves and their feelings. All right, what's next? I don't know. Oh yeah. So I just want to give just a little bit. If you want to share this with your kids, great. But I think this is really important sort of as a foundation. Emotions are physical responses. They activate through neurotransmitters, and hormones released by the brain. I realize I have to slow down a bit. Feelings are the conscious experience of emotional reactions. So we can think of it as emotions are first, feelings are second, and then moods are a string of feelings. And by the way, not helpful to say, especially to 12, 13, to anybody, but especially in middle level adolescence, why are you being so moody? Is not really a question. That is an accusation. So, like what's going on, it is a little bit like, or reframing that question better. Okay. Emotional regulation is a person's ability to change their experience and expression of positive and negative emotions in relation to the context. So what this means to you all and to your children, for example, at school and after school, is that the context, your child could basically have the same regulation system, but like your one child, I know it came across as like I was talking about multiple children. You take one child, and one child in first period can be a different regulated person by fourth period or after lunch, or it could be after school and the things that they're doing after school. So different contexts impact people differently. Cognitive control allows us to organize our thoughts and create strategies to evaluate and direct behavior towards a chosen goal in a complex matter. This is why the reason I have this up here for you all is because it directly relates to their ability to function and thrive in school. Emotional regulation and cognitive control are intertwined. For cognitive control to be executed, it must pass through brain areas that control emotions. It must. no matter how controlled we think we are and how logical, we all have emotions that are coming through first, and then our brain, and then our prefrontal cortex then does its work. But if that whole thing about like, I'm not really emotional and that kind of stuff, that means, I mean, don't want to get like way down the rabbit hole, but there are reasons that we want to suppress feelings of anger or feelings of sadness or feelings of being out of control. But everybody has emotions, and they happen first. And then our thinking happens through that process. All right. Oh, look at that. That's so annoying. Okay. So now we're going to get to emotional hijacking. And again, young people, if you're doing this with your parents, and when I ask you the question in a few minutes, like answer it for yourselves, don't answer it right away for your parents. So emotional hijacking is the experience of being captured by our emotional reaction in response to stimuli. So it causes fast thinking, not slow thinking. The brain processes physical and emotional threats in the same way. So, okay, so as a mom, I've had the experience, what's the word? I mean, it's sort of embarrassing to say it, but it's normal. It's understandable, is that I definitely had experiences where teachers or coaches or maybe athletic directors or people like that would do something. And I would say to myself inside my mind, I would say, oh, absolutely not. No. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to go fix that problem. And as soon as I recognized, as soon as that thing started happening in my head of like that tone of voice, I was fast thinking and not slow thinking. And when you fast think, you're not really thinking about the consequences, and you move really fast, and it's really difficult to listen, including when your child is saying, please do not do that. Please do not do that. There are times when we have to go, even if our children say no, but we got to really listen to them, because that's actually the minority of cases. All right, it is confusing, it can be overwhelming, and you can hurt people without realizing it. So, one of the things about emotional hijacking with parents is, and it goes directly to, being involved in the school. And I will talk about when do you get sort of more overtly, like a present in a conflict that your child has at school. But the thing that can happen, and this is in general, is that your child, when you do things fast thinking, even when you have, this is intent versus impact thing, is that even when you have the best of intentions, which is you love your children, but when we get emotionally hijacked and we start to move, then one of the things that happens is that we can do things that we don't necessarily have to take the consequences for, but who does? Our children. And so it can be, I'm not saying, and I want to be very, very clear here. There are times when when we can verify and we know that our child's life is in danger, like in the present moment, like is being threatened in the present moment, or is in danger in some way in the moment, that then we can move, right? Like if we think that if we have high school students and we get the call of like our child has had too much to drink or whatever, move, absolutely. But what we really need to do in that moment when we hear things that really make us anxious and emotionally hijacked is take a breath and ask yourself, is my child's life in danger right now? If they're not, let me think through this. And then you can go back to your principles, maybe if they're working for you, of like, how do I want to conduct myself in this situation so that my child learns and looks at the role modeling of an adult who's handling a difficult, painful, anxious experience, but handling it competently and treating themselves, the parent, the child, and other people with dignity. So that's the role modeling that is so powerful for young people. That is the role modeling when children see it, that as they grow, that they think, you know what, I'm in 8th grade, I'm in 7th grade, I'm in 8th grade, I'm in 9th grade, I'm in high school. Life's gotten a little bit more complicated. I've made a mistake, or maybe a friend of mine is doing something that my parent would be really upset if they knew. And I want to talk to my mom or my dad or whoever, who's parenting me and in my life that's important. I want to talk to them about it. If they know that you don't get emotionally hijacked easily, or that if you can calm yourself down, they will come and talk to you. They will talk to you about the things that are scary and hard, because they know that you are somebody that can listen to them and will walk them through the situations that they're in. If they think that you are going to run and rush, what happens, especially as they get older, is they don't talk to you. And we want your children talking to you. So it is really important that they see that you are dealing with this. And, we all have moments about being emotionally hijacked. And I've said to my own children, when I have had that moment of, okay, I was totally out of line. And so I need to stop this conversation right now because it's not going really well. I want to regroup later. Or I have gone back and used that terminology to say, like, you know what, I was out of line. I'm really sorry. I really didn't handle that the way that I wanted to. So I'd like to continue the conversation. When is a good time? Now that's age appropriate, but even when they're little, to be able to say, wow, mommy just got really, really upset, but I've calmed myself down. And so let's try and talk. I'm going to try and talk about this again. So we are literally role modeling that not only can we have this and we're human beings, but we can calm ourselves down and then we can repair the relationship. So all of these things are profoundly important for our relationships with our children. All right. So here's the question that I thought. And so young people, if you're listening, don't tell your parents what you think. When do I get more easily emotionally hijacked with my child? So I want you to just give yourself like 30 seconds to think, okay, I mean, it might come really easily to you. But just think about it. Like, conflicts are inevitable with the people that are with our children, right? Teachers, coaches, principals, I don't know, whoever, it's inevitable. So, so who is it or when is it? Do I get more easily emotionally hijacked with my kid? Yes, I'm going to say in the chat that this is being recorded and you are going to be able to get a copy. And I will tell you while people are putting stuff in the chat, so I don't forget, because I'm seeing this in the chat. If you want your children to watch this with you, here is my suggestion. Maybe your children think that all of your suggestions are super interesting and fabulous. Maybe you live in that universe. I do not. So in case, for those of us who do not have children, who think that our suggestions for podcasts, articles, books, webinars are really good, what I would suggest seriously, and I am quite serious about this, is that I would say, hey, I watched this webinar. I thought maybe it was helpful. So I'd really like to know what you think about it. And especially would like to know what you disagree with and, agree with, yes, but I really would like to know what you think. So for those of you who are going to watch this in a recording afterwards, because your parents asked you to do it, truly, more important than anything that I say this evening or in this recording is the conversation that you have with your parents. All right, everyone's doing such a good job. Give little virtual stars. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we can use some of these for the Q&A later. There's a lot of really good ones. So Sarah, let's use some of these, like child's disrespectful, when, you'll know exactly which ones I'm gonna,
Absolutely.
I totally try. Yeah, I don't even.
It's all like the activators that just get us all, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, so what are we doing now? Okay, let's go to next. Oh, okay, so once we realize that we're emotionally hijacked, we also have to understand about boundaries, and boundaries are so awesome. And so boundaries are the act of making you feel safe in your relationships. And boundaries are like windows. You can open and you can close them. So they're not permanent. Boundaries can change. Now, the thing that's really important for us as parents is that as parents, we feel like we have to give and give and give and give. And sometimes we can feel like I can't give one more ounce of energy. I can't give one more moment to this conversation that I've had 400 times. I can't give one more thing. Like the only person that you want to be with is your cat or your dog, and you just want to stroke their heads. And so it's really important that actually, and I talked about this with the teachers that we work with at Adams 12, is that they have been asked to do so much. In an average day, when I talk to your teachers, it's so common for them to be dealing with children that are dysregulated, understandably, because of the experience of the last 2 years, which comes out in all different kinds of ways. but children are basically acting about 18 months socially less mature than they were before. So they've got that. Then in the last month, we had teachers who are out because of COVID. So people were having to cover for everybody else, and it was changing every single day. Everybody was covering for people constantly. And then the average everyday thing of children having complicated lives and making mistakes and being mean to each other and being distraught and saying things they don't mean and scaring sometimes other kids or saying things that are just, they're like, what is going on? That is the normal of a day in a school. And so when I talk to the teachers at Adams 12, one of the things, and this is true for parents too, is that if you can establish boundaries for yourself, it actually enables you and empowers you to be able to give much more and to be able to give better, to be more effective. Because what happens when we give and we give and we give and we give is that we understandably start getting a little bit resentful. And I mean, I've had moments as a mom of like totally resenting my children because I'm doing everything I possibly can for them. And it's like, what? Right? It's like, can you see me as a person? And so really and by the way, I've gotten a couple of apologies. They're 19 and 21 now, which I think is sort of early on the age. I'm very, very grateful that, I've been getting some of those. Is that we all need to be doing that. I want you to and also for the parents out there who are not teachers, you probably have your own iteration of covering for people and not knowing what's going to happen every day and having children who are all over the place, having meltdowns, right? And just being so tired. So boundaries are helpful. So I'd really like for you all, I want you to think about, I'm just going to plant a seed right now. What is a boundary that you would like to set in your life? I want you to think about that. And now for children, I want you to stop thinking about that question. I want you to focus on what I'm going to say about your kids, is that boundaries are really important, but they're not established overnight. So if they are in a relationship and a friendship with other children, friendships are always incredibly important. But right now, it feels like they have to maintain the friendships that they were able to maintain during the last 2 years. The import of friendships is even more, it's more significant. And the feeling of I can't lose the friends I have is even more. And I mean, I could be wrong about that. That's an area where you should ask your children if I'm right or wrong. But the important thing, the thing that I think is universal to young people is that as adults, when they tell us problems that they're having with their peers, a normal response, a common response from an adult is to have the response just in it. Well, why don't you just stop being friends with that person? Why don't you just find other friends? Why don't you just is extremely annoying because it's like, well, if it was that easy, I would do it. Of course, I would have done it already. So we really want to try and not have why don't you just in our response conversations or default conversation responses. And the other thing is that we can say to young people, you don't have to make stop being friends with somebody right away. What is the smallest boundary? What is the smallest thing that you can do? If you're in a friendship with somebody that you don't think is good for you, then what's the smallest thing that you can do to establish a boundary? And so using the metaphor of the window that you can close it and open it and you can change how much something is open or closed is really, really helpful because it doesn't feel so permanent and doesn't feel so dramatic. And you can also, by the way, you can close the window all the way and you can still see through it and you can still see the other person and somehow be interacting with that person in some capacity. And so that's and that, by the way, I did not come up with. An Adams 12 teacher in one of our trainings actually came up with that. And I thought that was brilliant of putting the window all the way down, but you can still see the person through it. So that as a metaphor can be really powerful for anybody, but for kids when they're trying to define what kind of relationships that they want. And remember, we all had friendships and relationships that weren't so great for us. And we didn't wake up one morning and say, oh, I'm done with that, right? I'm going to let go of that friendship. These things are really, really hard. And so to stay present with our children, to acknowledge the feelings, to get them to be saying well, what do you feel about the potential of losing this friendship? What's the best thing that would happen if you lost this friendship? What's the worst thing that would happen if you lost this friendship? And have them write it down and don't look over their shoulder and give them suggestions. Have them write it down, give them the time to do it. And then the more granular you are, the more you understand your experiences. And the more you can decide what kind of boundary is appropriate, knowing that you can always change them. So now here's the question. The question is, what boundary do I need to set around my child to support my parenting? So I really do want you to do this for yourself too. So as a parent in your parenting, what boundary do you need to set for yourself? And that could be with your child, setting up a boundary with your child. It could be about parenting with someone else. But I'm going to give you a minute to just really sit quietly and think about as soon as I start my timer. Okay, you have a minute to think about what kind of boundary you think you need to set. If you want to put it in the chat, you can. If you want to keep it private, of course, totally fine. If you want to send it to me, totally fine. And I'm the only person that will see it. Okay, like wrapping up your feelings, your thoughts. Okay. All right. Whoops, I did it again. Hold on. Okay. Now, let's go to, so I'm seeing lots of wonderful questions, and Sarah's, I'm sure, holding them too. So we will get to your questions. Oh, wait, hold on 1 second, Sarah. How does one, I got a really good boundary question. I'm not really sure. I might answer somebody. Let's see. I'm thinking. This is a keynote person thinking. Okay. So there's a question that is about boundaries that's really good, and it's really and this is what, and it speaks to like the complexity of the issues that we're talking about. So when you establish a boundary, when you communicate a boundary, the person on the receiving end of it is going to have in general, will have a couple of different reactions. One is they won't get what you're saying. And that could also be because, and I could do a whole thing on this, and I've written about this a lot, about why when we're in moments of establishing boundaries, do we sometimes not say clearly what we need. So sometimes we don't communicate clearly and the person doesn't understand what we're saying, or they don't want to understand what we're saying, so they choose not to, or they could get really defensive. They could go on the attack to you. There's a couple different, they could rationalize. They could say that they agree with you and then blow over your boundary. That's a pretty common one. So here's my general rule about how we communicate our boundaries. Number one, oh, and I think I'm sort of, let's see. Okay, let me just queue up something because I think I'm right there. Hold on 1 sec. Okay. Yep. Okay. So yeah. So I'm going to take that question of boundaries and I'm going to connect it to when we're in conflict with somebody and how we communicate our feelings about that. So I'm going to put them together. And I hope that's helpful. And frankly, somebody in response to you expressing your anger is going to respond somewhat similar to what I'm talking about how they respond to establishing a boundary. So, so here are the things I want you to think about. I want you to think about, I'm going to sort of mush some stuff together. So I hope this is clear. And if it's not, tell me in the chat and I will do better. So when somebody comes to us about a problem with our child, there can be an experience of, it is a lifetime. Like your child is being sort of sentenced to like being a bully, for example, or being a queen bee, one of my least favorite things to hear. And because it's like, this is who you are. And that's not the way that's not what happens. Like we have to have faith that people will move and change and that we will grow and develop no matter how old we are. And so including adults is what I mean. But we don't want to, I want us to really think about that when somebody comes to us with a problem with our child, it doesn't feel like we're getting a lifetime sentence. It is a moment. It's a moment in time. The next thing I want us to think about is when, and this would go with communicating boundaries, is keep it short and don't repeat yourself. So this would be the same if you are in conflict with somebody, or if you're establishing a boundary, you want to hold these two things true. Keep it short and don't repeat. The next thing is I want you to think about keeping it to 3 issues or 3 ideas or three things you need, three things at most to the other person that explains your behavior, your actions, like creating a boundary. And really you can just say 1. In fact, I think really like 1 to 3 at the absolute maximum. One of the things that we need to be really aware of as parents with our children, and sometimes with the adults in our children's lives, is that for many reasons, we think that if we're going to be right about something in a conflict, or that people are going to listen to us, we have to justify it with many, many different reasons why that other person was wrong and that we're right. And that's actually not helpful. Young people stop listening after maybe the second thing that you say, which is why I'm saying keep it to 3. And pretty much most people disconnect and don't listen to you if you're getting a litany, because if there's a long list of things that they've done wrong, then how are they possibly ever going to get it right? And it's not an invitation to solving the problem. It's you are terrible. It comes across as you are a terrible person and there's nothing you can do to make it right. So in order for somebody to be in a conversation with you to resolve a conflict, they have to feel like they can be part of the solution. And so when there's a long list of things, people don't feel that way and they shut down. And they can shut down by literally shutting down, or they can shut down by being super obnoxious. They can say something sarcastic. They can roll their eyes and sigh. You know, adults are not above saying things that are really patronizing or nasty. And so so really, like, I'm not excusing that behavior at all. I'm saying that I want us to understand the dynamics that we're in, so we can, once we understand it, we can change it. And we can change ourselves. And then time and place. So time and place is everything. I mean, we know this, and we know when we're sitting here, like talking this kind of webinar thing, but what it matters is when we are in the moment. So like I had an experience once with a teacher that I was aggravated with, and I don't even remember why, honestly. And I think my younger child was in 3rd grade, and I had a busy day in front of me, had a lot of things to do. And as soon as I saw that teacher, and I just made for a beeline for her. And, you know, teachers have this happen to them. So they know, and when they see a parent coming to them, like I was coming to this teacher, teachers are human beings. They get emotionally hijacked. And so I went for a beeline to this teacher, and I immediately, it was like morning time. There were like children streaming into the school. She had a million other things that she was preoccupied doing and distracted by, or actually it was her responsibility to do. And I just saw her and started talking to her about my needs and how annoyed I was. And I realized, I don't know, it must have been the look on her face, but I don't know what it was, but about, I don't know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds into it, I realized what I was doing. And I realized, frankly, how absurd I was behaving. And I stopped myself, and I truly did this. And I said, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I need to do that again. And I literally physically backed myself up. I mean, it was ridiculous in a way that I did this, but I needed to physically back myself up. And then I walked back to her and I said, good morning. Can we try this again? Is now a good time to talk? I need about 3 minutes of your time. So we can always change it. We just need to be mindful in the moment. That's our goal, is to be mindful in the moment of like, oh, I need to stop right now. Time and place, and time and place is enormous for your children, because bringing up stuff in front of their friends, there's an art form to that. There are times to say things to your child in front of their friends because you want their friends to know what you stand for and what your values are. And then there are times like personal, like things where your child's struggling through, or personal issues that are happening between the two of you that you do not want to speak to in front of their friends, no matter how close their friends are, because that's a really important, that's a really important boundary. So let me give you an example about that. If my sons might have said something disparaging about another kid, another girl, might have said or said words that are against what that are my values, but are common words that people say in school, then I absolutely, in front of their friends, will say, I mean, this is when they were in like 7th grade, 8th grade. That's when I really started that's when it was really like, and I will now do this to really establish what this family stands for, is absolutely in front of their friends. And if their friends said things that I thought were inappropriate, I would call them out too. And I would say, yeah, that, what you just said, and I would say it, what I just heard, that is not going to be acceptable. Like, not only in my house, but like, I demand better from you. Because not only do I demand like high expectations of treating people with dignity from my own children, but any child who comes into my house and like eats my food and opens my refrigerator and like eats my chips and stuff like that, that's my child. So, and many of you might have these children who come into your house, who sleep over at your house, that you adore and love. And maybe even if you don't love them so much, that you say, like, if you hear something like that, you're like, no, not only because this is what this family doesn't stand for, but because you and I are in a relationship, because I care about you. And so I'm going to hold you accountable. And if they go home and tell their parents that you yelled at them, which if you say it the way I said it, I don't think they're going to do, then you can, when the parent calls you up and has an emotionally hijacked conversation with you about what did you say to my child, your response is something in your own words, like, it's really important. Thank you so much for calling. I'm really glad we could talk about this. You're like, really important. And, it's really important to me that we treat ourselves and others with dignity. And that's what I talk to your child about. So if you, and really, like, that's our values. Like, we treat people with inherent worth. And when your child said X, that wasn't doing that. And so, that's just what we stand for. That's what's important to me. And then you can have a conversation from there. And if they're not respecting, literally the words that you are saying and not treating you with dignity, you can say, I'm not really feeling like this conversation is going great. Like, I don't feel like you're treating, me with dignity in this conversation. When you want to have another conversation, because I'd really like to do it at another point, call me up and let's do it. But the vast majority of parents, honestly, I mean, even with the stuff we hear about, or maybe even personally experience, the vast majority in my experience of working with parents who can get really up there in anxiety or anger, or don't talk to my kid this way or whatever, is when we say, look, I love your kid. And it's really important to me that I treat them with dignity. And when I heard that, in the car, in carpool, at the house, whatever, it's really important to me to be able to be, in relationship with your child this way, and to say, this is what I stand for. So, and if they don't like that, that's something to be, you're not gonna be able to control that, but you can control your family, and you can't control your relationship with that child. So it's not only role modeling for your child, but it's also appropriate role modeling and village raising, right? It takes a village to raise a child. It's appropriate boundaried parenting of other people's children. Okay. It is 7:03. So let's go to some of these questions, and then I'll fill in some other stuff if I think it's appropriate, of like where we are. So Sarah, take it away. What should we do? There's a lot of good stuff.
Yes, we have a great question, and I kind of summarized it, but how do you help your child when they don't like to be told what to do?
Wait, can you say, I started laughing too fast. Can you say that again?
Well, because it happens to all of us,
right?
Right. Your child's almost, pushing you away, doesn't really want to be told what to do, but you know that they need help. They're sad, they're upset. So how do you lean in and help them?
Yeah. So there's a couple different strategies. I think it's really important to stay away from those why questions. Do not start questions with a child like that with the word why. Start questions with, can you help me understand? Or how did you get to, how are you feeling this way? Or how is it that this happened? is way better than why. You just got to watch your tone, because your children know you really well. So they know a why question that's hidden in a how question. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, and that speaks to us asking curious questions versus non-curious questions. So curious questions, and this is why you have to regulate before you have the conversation, or take a pause, take a break, and come back to the conversation, is a curious question expresses like genuine curiosity for what the answer would be, or to have more information, to understand the other person's perspective better. Non-curious questions, and our children are really good at picking up our non-curious questions, that it feels like the child feels like they've already been sentenced to a judgment before the conversation has even started. So that could be one possible reason. And you could ask your child too. You could say like, hey, I'm asking you these questions, but you don't want to tell me. I'd like to maybe understand why you don't want to tell me. So forget about the content. Just focus on like, what is it that's happening right now about why the child doesn't want to talk to you. So for example, you might ask a million questions. When they start saying something, you might say, it's called, especially if your child's had a hard time with something, it's called interviewing for pain. I think it was Wendy Mogul who came up with that term, who wrote the book, Blessing of a Skinned Knee. And interviewing for pain is like, your child says, well, the kids were mean to me at school today, or the child, something happened at school today. And your response is, well, where were you? Well, what did they say? Well, what did you say? Well, where was the teacher? Where was the teacher aide? Where was, all these things. And your child will shut down because you're asking too many questions. It's the quintessential thing in general, of like, if you are a big question asker when they get into the car at the end of the day, it's harder for your child to want to tell you things when things are heightened. So if they get into the car, when you pick them up from school, and you're saying like, how was your test? How was this? Who did you sit with at lunch today? Please don't ask that question. Were kids nice to you today? That's not a helpful question. You're interviewing for pain. And so if you're asking a lot of questions and it feels like an interrogation, that's why your child shuts down. When your child if they have an emotionally healthy relationship with you, when they get into the car, they want to decompress. And so those questions rev them back up again. So you can ask them, like, do I ask you too many questions? And be prepared to honor the answer and say, and then I would do something like, okay, I'd like to come up with 2 questions I can ask you. Can you help me come up with 2 questions that are okay for me to ask you? And so they are in partnership with you, telling you what the questions are that they can tolerate at this moment. So you're scaffolding, right? You're scaffolding up. And also young people want to be in control of their lives. And so and that's developmentally appropriate. And so if they don't feel that way, they're going to shut down, because that is the one way that they have control, is to shut down and not give you information. So another thing that I do is I will say and this is something I did as a mom, and as with my students, but also worked with my children, is I would say, okay, if I have 100%, if there's 100% of information that I'd like to know, could I maybe get like 20%? Like, what is the percentage that you are okay telling me right now? And you can laugh about 5%, 0.2%, but we just need to get on the scoreboard. And so we'd be like, hey, okay, 5%, what's the 5%? And then you have to honor it by not asking a million questions right afterwards. So the follow-up question after that 5%, if you're really concerned, is anyone's health or safety in this moment in trouble, right? That would be the question that you would ask. And then if that is a concern, this is why it is so important that adults trust each other, is that as a parent, you're going to get this information. You've got to trust that and know that it's okay that you don't have to do this all alone. And so we've got to be able to support these counselors, and we've got to support these cells and these teachers, because they're dealing with this stuff like all the time. And so if you get information and being able to talk to a teacher and say, hey, or the counselor or the cell, this is what was reported to me. And I know what people are going to ask me, which is, what if my child says, don't tell anyone? I want to say right now that what I would suggest that you say, Sarah, tell me if there's anything to add, is I would say, I would love to make that promise, I cannot make the promise that if you tell me something or somebody is in danger, that I can't say anything, right? I can't do that. I can't make that promise. But what I can make the promise is, if you tell me something like that, we're going to think about who the person is at school or whatever is appropriate, who the person is that you think is the best, most qualified, that you trust to tell this information to. And so then you as the parent are the bridge, and then you can say to the child, like, we can go together, we can write an email together, we can, and so you're giving them ownership over this situation, but they've got you as their support system. And then they are also thinking through who the person is that they can go to for help, which goes back to my principle, right, of asking for help is a capacity. It is not a weakness. So you're role modeling that asking for help is a real strength. So Sarah, anything to add about that? That's a folding question, I guess, is a way of saying.
And I think there's so many different ways, right? When you're talking to your child, these conversations can go. So absolutely. Anytime we're worried about a friend, we can go to the school, we can go to support. There's also Safe to Tell, that we can make an anonymous tip to get the support for a child as well. Kind of to add on to the question that we were talking about earlier, I think about a child when students come home and they just had a really hard day and they tell you all the things, like the laundry list of things that went wrong. And we want to fix it all, right? Well, this is what you should do, and that's what you should do. And, I think that's another part of the question that was asked earlier. And, do you have some advice on like how to navigate that laundry list? Because some of that can activate us and hijack us, right? And that's not helpful. And then, right. So all those things.
Yeah. So, okay. So in that situation, there are a lot of children who come home, and this is a good thing. They want to vent to you, right? They see you and they're like, oh, here's all the bad things that happened to me. And it is understandable as a parent, be like, what is going on at that school? Are those teachers insane? Like, is that principal lost their mind? Is that child the worst child? Like, that's somebody else's child. Is that child the worst child? Who's doing something about this? That child needs to be suspended right now, right? Understandable to have those feelings. But the reality is that children vent, and that is a good thing. It's a good thing because they're just like getting it out, and really the vast majority of kids are telling their parents things because they want to vent and get it off their chest. But then you're walking around with like, are these people at the school insane? And is that child the worst child in the entire world? I'm not letting that child come over for a sleepover. Are you kidding me? And do I need to tell the parent? And maybe I need to stop being friends with that parent. I mean, all this stuff like da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's really understandable to feel that way. So here's, first of all, what I want you to think about. Number one, when we vent, we tend to focus on the really bad things. And we also, especially if your child's in an altercation with someone, this is human nature, we tend to focus on the things that hurt us and minimize the things that we did as a part of the dynamic. That's just human nature. That's not like, saying your child's lying or anything like that. It is just the way that sometimes we tend to minimize the impact of our behavior on other people, especially if we think we're justified. So just think about venting is normal. They're telling you like all of the bad things. They're children, so it's hard for them to remember that you're a human being. And so you're going to walk around with like all of this like feeling in your body about all of these things, and it could make you worried. So what I do is I say to young people, are you venting or do you want advice? And you can change your mind. Like you can go from venting to changing, to wanting advice. Just tell me when you want to do that. And so what that's doing is it's acknowledging the young person's experience, and it's also helping their brain transition from this venting thing to, okay, now I need advice and now I'm ready to listen, right? Because one of the things that happens when we're venting and someone gives us advice is we do not listen to their advice because we don't feel like we're being listened to, which is why we shut down. So really venting, I want you to remember venting is a release. Remember, like take it with a grain of salt, which is not discounting your child's experience, just take it as a grain of salt. with a grain of salt, and then ask them if they just want to get it off their chest, or if they want advice from you.
That's great. That's helpful. I think going back to the emotional hijacking, I think some of the activators were school assignments, right? We have our kids and they say, yeah, I've got everything turned in. And then you're getting a notice from the teacher that they've got 5 missing assignments, or you've asked them to clean the room and do chores. And, it's just the repetitive kinds of things. And as adults, we're like, why haven't they gotten this? But there's reasons for that, right? Like kids are still learning and we get very frustrated with them.
Yeah, because it's frustrating. I mean, children can be terrible roommates, like terrible roommates. So I mean, a couple of things. One is, by the way, this is something that I talk to teachers about a lot with social emotional learning, because teaching social emotional learning is not going to fix behaviors. It's not going to make all children be like, and now I will express my feelings in a very mature way. And I will understand when I'm being emotionally hijacked, and I will treat you with dignity at all times. That's not the way this goes. This as parents, that's not the way this goes, which also doesn't mean that those kinds of programs are useless. I mean, there are some programs that are not so great, but we just got to really actually look at them, because as a overall, those kinds of things are really important, but we can't put up a pedestal of they have to fix all behavior problems. So it's, we have to think about this. And I really do say this to teachers, just as I would say to you, is, so we're going to take the child's going to take 1 step forward and 2 diagonal and 2 over this way, and maybe then 1 back. And then we're going to go 2 steps forward. So this is a journey. This is a process. And so I can say to my children, put the dishes in the dishwasher. I probably said that to them. I mean, I don't know how old they are, whatever it is, every day. So several thousand times. But it doesn't help me when I say it over and over and over again in that one moment. That's not helpful. But being consistent about it over time is helpful, but it is incredibly frustrating. And that's why, and it's hard because it's also really hard not to take it personally when they're doing things like being under the category of bad roommates. So here's some, just for an answer to this question, here are some distinctions that I make as a parent. They can, in general, leave their room as basically as messy as they want it, as long as it does not smell terrible and they are cleaning their sheets on a bi-weekly basis. There's some parameters of just being a human being, of general habits and hygiene that we need to do. But we also need to accommodate, it's their room and it can be really messy. What is not, I'm just speaking to you as a parent and the boundaries that I had, which I found helpful. And we have a very clear boundary that food cannot be left in the room. And I'm about to lie right there. I actually just about lied to you all. I was about to say, and I never have or don't take their food out of their room sometimes, but that's not true. Sometimes I've gotten so crazy desperate that I have taken, if I found a plate under the bed or something like that. But in general, the rule was you have to bring your plate down if for whatever reason you're eating in your room in the first place, which I was not accepting of as a general rule anyway. So, so those are the rules as far as being messy is okay. Hygiene is incredibly important, and having a habit of hygiene is okay. And being responsible for your space is also really important. And I really connect room hygiene with just overall hygiene of just personal habits and doing that. And then, for homework. So I can't, I might get in trouble with Adam's 12 about this, but I can't stand and my kids went to BVSD. I hated Infinite Campus because it made children constantly checking, by the time they're in high school or in 8th grade, oh, I've been 93.3 or this, and they were constantly checking their GPAs. And it was making them really, really anxious. And then the other part is that sometimes teachers would put the assignments in and then it would look like they were missing, like Sarah's talking about. And then you'd be go into the Infinite Campus and it would look like nothing was there. Your child is saying, I did do the assignment. It's just, right? So this is why, because this is going to be sort of inherent, there's an inherent tension to the academic grading programs and what we check in and we see and what teachers are doing and what they can possibly do. And what your child is saying. So there's a lot of messiness that could be in this. Like your child could maybe be fibbing, like they could be intending to hand in the assignment, but they haven't, but they're thinking in sort of the future, which is, I definitely intend to do that. I'm just going to tell my mom or dad right now that I did because I want them off my back, but I definitely intend to do it. So I'm not technically lying to them. That's actually like a phenomenon. So that's one thing that could be happening. Second thing is that the teacher, and I'm not taking away teachers' responsibility, please hear me, but when teachers are in a emotionally hijacked state, or when they have people who are angry at them a lot, or not giving them the benefit of the doubt, or having to cover for people, and are tired dealing with their own stuff, with their own families and all of that, it can get a little bit harder to submit those assignments on time, right? It's just reality. It's not, we need to figure it out, and we need to figure it out by treating each other with dignity and giving each other the benefit of the doubt. So that could be happening. A teacher could have made a mistake. That could have happened. So all to say, this is a great opportunity, no matter how old your child is, to some extent, develop the social skill to write a professional email. So even if they're 8 years old, you are going to sit down with that child and say, what is it we want to ask the teacher? What do we want to ask Ms. Wiseman? Well, that assignment, I don't understand that assignment. I'd like to set up a time to talk to you about that. When is a good time, Ms. Wiseman? And as they get older, you're going to scaffold it and give them more so that by the time they're in high school, what I think is really important is that they learn how to write a professional email to a teacher. And that email includes, by the way, dear Ms. Wiseman, lots of kids are sending these kinds of emails without even that and just demanding something. That's not the way we write emails. This is a social skill. This is a professional skill that they can learn in school. So have your child write a draft of the email that's expressing their confusion, their frustration, their whatever. Say exactly what they don't like that's happening in the class, exactly what they want or the expectations they think they understand from the teacher. If it's appropriate, if the child thinks it's appropriate, when is a good time to meet? And then have your child, if at all possible, review the email before it gets sent. And it's an opportunity to see how your child communicates with other people. And I mean, you might understand sometimes why a teacher might get a little bit crabby if you see the email that the child wrote that was, developmentally appropriate, but maybe wasn't so polite. And they are learning how to write professional emails. And teachers should realize not to take that personally, and they should role model how to write a good email back. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So you can be a good role model and you can look at it and say, I just want to review it, just because this is a really important skill you're going to learn for the rest of your life. Look at it, make some suggestions, ask curious questions in your suggestions. And then you are clear about what's happening in this sort of mess of your child trying to figure out what's going on, the teachers trying to figure out what's going on. And then we have things like Infinite Campus that sometimes are not tracking what's really going on. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. That was a lot.
That makes sense. And I think too, it's going back to, we can get so emotionally hijacked when we think our kids aren't doing what they are supposed to be doing. And so really taking that time to regulate, to ask open-ended questions like, what's happening? What's going on? Let's find out. You're like coaching side by side instead of interrogating, because every kid wants to do well, right? If they can. And so they just need some time and space to work that through. So that makes sense. This has been so great. I think, thinking about principles and emotion regulation and emotional hijacking along with boundaries. Is there any last sort of thoughts that you have that you would want to connect with the audience?
Yeah, just like, this is so hokey, but like, we're so in this together. And I would ask you for, you might maybe think like, okay, well, I'm at this webinar, but who really should have been like that teacher who gets emotionally hijacked, or is obnoxious to the kids, or that parent who is running into the school screaming all the time, or whatever. You might have that in your head. Well, we don't let that stop you from empowering yourself to make a difference in your community. So, you know, if there's an adult in your community that is taking away, and, you know, I don't want to get into like the reasons why or whatever, because in some ways it doesn't matter. It's that if they're taking away the dignity of one person, they're taking away the dignity of all of us, including themselves, by the way. And it really tears apart the ability for the adults in the community, all of us, to be able to do what we need to do, to have the emotional reserves, to do the hard work of working together to raise our children. So, you know, if you're back in the sports world with your children and you see a coach or a person on the sidelines, a parent, you know, who is running off the rails, that, you know, I can talk for a long time about that kind of stuff, but the thing I want you to hear from me is you can treat other people with dignity. And the smallest act, I don't need to make these grandiose gestures. It's the smallest act of supporting each other this way that really repairs. And we need to do this. I don't know if we have a choice. I mean, we have a choice to look the other way, but I think we're seeing the significant cost of that. And so I really don't want to take, I hope you hear me in that. As much as I'm an advocate for teachers and schools, I'm just as much an advocate for parents. And I think that parents sometimes have had horrendous experience at schools and where people have undermined you or things like that, and or your child. And that is absolutely not, it's so difficult to get through that. I don't know a parent who frankly hasn't had that experience as they've gone through the educational system. But that doesn't mean that all the other people that are in education that are getting to school so early, who are staying so late, who are on this webinar right now, who are there for your children doing their best, you know, sending your kid into the bus, running back to, you know, take another phone call and 4 other meetings. Just remember all of that, because both things are true. And when we remember that, so we can really hold our experiences and not take away from each other's experiences, and then have this bedrock of dignity to myself, children, the people that are taking care of my children, I think I hope it can settle us down and also give us courage to be able to be in presence with and interacting with people who might be really struggling with that. So I really hope that that's been helpful to you. And I really, as I am a member of your community, selfishly, I think we all benefit from that. So I'm just really grateful that you all are here and have been in community with me this evening. And I just, you know, hope it's not the last time. I hope it's, you know, we just continue to have this wonderful relationship with my organization, with me, and with with Adams 12.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. We love working with you. This was so helpful. We have so many wonderful messages of gratitude for you and everything that you're saying. For those of you still on the call, we will be sending out the recording and some of the notes that were in the Prezi so that you can have some of the language that Rosalind talked about this evening. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you all soon.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. See you soon.